migrant caravan travelling through Mexico has decided to halt its journey north towards the United States after its members reached an agreement with authorities to regularise their situation in the country. The electoral campaign ahead of Chile's second-round presidential election this Sunday has concluded as voters prepare to make a choice between two very different models proposed for the country. Russia presented a new proposal for a security deal with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization on Friday as it seeks an end to the military encirclement of its territory. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. A migrant caravan travelling through Mexico has decided to halt its journey north towards the United States after its members reached an agreement with authorities to regularise their situation in the country. The caravan, made up of mainly Central American asylum seekers, will be dissolved in the capital with the regularization of some 400 people after negotiations with the government of Andrés Manuel López Obrador. The caravan was initially made up of some 4,000 people, but given the difficulties of the dangerous journey north, many had decided to stay in Mexico given the opportunities offered for the granting of humanitarian visas and the possibility of employment opportunities. Seven years ago this Friday, the remaining three of the 5 Cuban heroes who served unjust sentences in United States prisons for fighting terrorism returned to Cuba. The 5, as they are known worldwide, had infiltrated groups operating in Miami that planned terrorist attacks on Cuba under the complicit gaze and with support from the US Central Intelligence Agency. In the midst of the battle for the return of the 5 heroes, the historic leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro, assured the Cuban people that they would return. On December 17, 2014, as a result of negotiations between the two countries, Gerardo Hernández, Antonio Rodriguez and Ramón Lavanino returned to the island just as had Fernando González and René González beforehand after serving their sentences, representing the triumph of the international campaign for their release. The move also came as Cuba and the United States, then under the Barack Obama administration, announced they would work to re-establish diplomatic relations. The progress achieved in the subsequent years was destroyed with the arrival of Donald Trump to the White House. More than 100 House Democrats called on the Biden administration to re-engage with Cuba and lift policies put in place by former President Donald Trump while normalizing relations on everything from travel to financial transactions. The letter to the president underlined the failed policy of unilateral isolation and called for principled engagement to better serve the rights of the Cuban people. Biden had pledged to improve relations following the path of Obama, to whom he served as vice president, but has done nothing to reverse Trump's tightening of the blockade policy against Cuba since assuming office. Cuban culture is in mourning following the announcement this Friday of the death of singer-songwriter Vicente Felu. The renowned artist, a founding member of the Nueva Trova movement, along with Silvio Rodriguez, Pablo Milanés and Noah Nicola, was known for his songs inspired by the Cuban Revolution and reality. The Casa de las Americas paid tribute to the artist in a tweet on learning of his death, noting his saying that he was a soldier of the Casa and that he would always be remembered. Felu also composed for theatre and television plays and collaborated in cultural programs as an assistant director and musical director. He was a music advisor for Cuban radio and television and a scriptwriter, announcer and radio director. A virtual summit of the Southern Common Market, Mercosur, was held Friday, with tariffs featuring as one of the most controversial issues. Mercosur members, Argentina, Brazil and Paraguay, pledged to continue the modernization of the bloc and to advance in the revision of the common external tariff without Uruguay's participation in a declaration at the end of the less than 2-hour meeting. Montevideo has made its support for the tariff cut conditional on the liberalization of bilateral negotiations with third countries, while it tries to make progress on a free trade agreement with China. The summit, initially planned with a face-to-face meeting of the leaders in the Brazilian capital, took place online without the Brazilian government specifying the reasons. Mercosur members represent a population of more than 300 million, and the bloc is the world's 5th largest economy, according to the International Monetary Fund. The Chamber of Deputies of Argentina's new Congress rejected the national budget for 2022 submitted by the government of President Alberto Fernández. After more than 20 hours of debate and with 132 votes against, the opposition, led by the right-wing Together for Change coalition, prevented the approval of the budget, which maintained a 4% growth forecast for the next year. The ruling party warned of the importance of the budget's approval for the success of the debt renegotiation process underway with the International Monetary Fund. It was expected that the government would obtain the necessary votes after negotiations on certain specific issues, but tensions between the two factions ended up preventing the budget passing. Venezuelan authorities announced a new attack on the country's power grid this Friday. Minister for Electric Power Néstor Luis Reverol reported that the attack took place at the Guri electricity facility in the south of the country, causing blackouts in several states.
We have received a new attack on the national electrical system, specifically in the Guri plant. Once again, those who have shown no mercy in 2019 are attacking our people, even during these Christmas holidays. Well, we are with the workforce of Cuerpo Elec, and under the guidelines of the President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, at the forefront of all the maneuvers for the recovery of the service.
The minister also informed that efforts were ongoing to restore power to all affected areas.
We ask for the support of the people of Venezuela, with conscience and in peace, to overcome this vile and criminal attack. We are now at the National Dispatch Center in charge of all the maneuvers, following the guidelines of President Nicolás Maduro, and we will continue informing about the stabilization and normalization of the national electric system.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The electoral campaign ahead of Chile's second-round presidential election this Sunday has concluded, as voters prepared to make a choice between two very different models proposed for the country. As established by the Electoral Code as of this Friday, the pre-election silence is in force, and for 48 hours prior to the opening of polling stations, all campaigning is prohibited throughout the country, as well as the conducting of polls and advertising. At the same time, the electoral authorities are fine-tuning details regarding the deployment of voting materials, the security of polling stations, and health protocols. In this context, the closing day of the campaign was also marked by the death of dictator Augusto Pinochet's widow and a consequent wave of reactions. In his closing campaign rally, far-right presidential candidate of the Christian Social Front coalition, José Antonio Casta, claimed that his victory was assured and he would win by a wide margin.
But I have great news for you, that on Sunday we're going to win, and we are going to win with an important difference. Because dignity is what we lack, but true dignity, not that dignity that some want with violence, someone with intolerance, someone to take that intolerance, that violence to tell us what dignity is. That is a false dignity. We're going to work for the true dignity of the people.
Meanwhile, the presidential candidate of the Apruebo Dignidad coalition, Gabriel Borrich, closed his campaign with assurances that his government would not neglect the health sector and would advance in the task of building a plurinational country, hand in hand with the Constitutional Convention and Indigenous peoples.
We will also create in our government, and we have discussed this. These are not ideas that appear in a meeting of politicians in a commando, but they are the product of the social struggles of many, particularly in this case of the health workers. I want to talk to you about the fact that in our government we will create a universal health system that does not discriminate between rich and poor, so that everyone has the right to be healthy. It is difficult to talk about the first thing we are going to do when we enter government, but what we are certain of is that on that day we will not enter alone, but with us the people will enter.
Panama's Indigenous Ancestral Games are sessioning, which seek to preserve age-old customs. 250 competitors from Panama's 7 recognized indigenous ethnicities are taking part in traditional athletic feats at the Games. The major cultural festival transcends the simple quest for sporting success by helping to preserve a way of life. This is the 3rd edition of the event that resembles the Scottish Highland Games and Basque rural sports competitions. In Panama, contestants compete in archery, spear throwing, log carrying, tug of war, running, swimming and canoeing in the Gabi Buglul, the largest of Panama's 5 traditional indigenous regions. Panama's recognized indigenous communities represent 12% of the country's 4.3 million population, according to the last official census in 2010. These communities are facing a number of challenges, especially in relation to recognition of and rights to territories, as well as forcible eviction.
My grandfather was Embera. He hunted with the bow and arrow. He also swam. I don't want to lose our culture. I want to continue being part of my grandparents, of my family, who are Embera.
I am very passionate about swimming. I'm more about my indigenous culture. I would like to learn a lot more about it.
The way of transportation for us, apart from walking, is rowing. It's something we do every day, and that's how we have been preparing myself since I was a child until now.
We are representing the ancestors, what my grandparents, what my parents used to do, and what many of us have lost, and we are rebuilding. Our ancestors were warriors and used weapons such as spears, bows, and arrows for defense and hunting. In the years that have gone by, this form of coexistence has been lost. Therefore, with the games, we try to spread and teach the new generations that at some point that was important, and for us it was something symbolic that represents our identity.
After 2 years at the forefront of the World Health Organization's pandemic battle, and despite the ongoing challenges, including vaccine inequality and the spread of new variants of COVID-19, Emergency's Chief Michael Ryan remains optimistic that humanity will change course and take the steps needed to tame the virus.
I'm filled with optimism for what we can collectively achieve as a species. When we come to terms with, inclusion and social justice and equity and health justice and equity and climate justice and equity, and that I think we're beginning to see that this planet and this very stressed planet, politically, ecologically, that we need to take a different path. And I think there's a generation emerging that want that path. They want something more sustainable. I do think if we knuckle down now in terms of disease control, if we knuckle down in terms of getting vaccine coverage up, if we continue to evolve our surveillance and our epidemiology and our ability to produce second and third generation vaccines, then I think we can consign this virus at the very least to amongst the other viruses that cause respiratory infections. I don't think we'll ever quite get rid of this virus. I think it's here to stay in the same way that influenza never really goes away.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Russia demanded on Friday that the United States and its allies halt all military activity in Eastern Europe and Central Asia as it presented a proposal for a new security deal with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The Russian government launched the initiative in a bid to secure its national security in the face of NATO's eastward expansion and military encirclement of the country. The Russian proposal, immediately dismissed by NATO officials, came in the form of a draft treaty, suggesting NATO should offer written guarantees that it would not expand further east toward Russia and halt all military activities in the former Soviet republics. The proposals also call for a ban on sending US and Russian warships and aircraft to areas from where they can strike each other's territory, along with a halt to NATO military drills near Russia. It also establishes the respect of both parties and their allies for the principles of the UN Charter. Palestinians took to the streets of Gaza City on Friday to march in support of the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas and celebrate its 34th anniversary, as the organisation called on Israel to end its suffocation of the Palestinian people. Thousands of Hamas members and supporters participated in the march and rally launched after Friday prayers in the Gaza Strip. Addressing the crowd, Hamas leaders stressed that they will continue to resist the Israeli occupation and blockade. They also noted that Jerusalem is a red line and will remain the centre of conflict, noting that defending it is a sacred duty.
Our message to the enemy is that the walls you are building and pride yourself with and spend billions of dollars on will not protect you, as you announce finishing the wall around Gaza. We say that if you think this wall will protect you from the resistance, then you are delusional. We are confident that you will spend money and billions in vain. Our message to the Zionist enemy is that you will not hold out. The resistance is long-lasting, facing the continuous siege imposed on the Gaza Strip, and we warn the enemy against betting on the siege and continuing to clamp down on our Palestinian people.
A demonstration in the Israeli-annexed East Jerusalem neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah turned violent as Israeli security forces repressed Palestinian protesters. Land rights tensions in Sheikh Jarrah exploded in May when at least 7 Palestinian families protested an attempt by illegal Israeli settlers to evict them from their homes. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs last month said there had been 410 attacks by settlers against Palestinian individuals and on property in the first 10 months of this year alone. Demonstrators rallied in Tunisia on Friday to mark the anniversary of what became known as the revolution that sparked the 2011 Arab uprisings. This Friday marks 11 years since street vendor Mohamed Bouazizi set himself alight in the marginalized town of Sidi Bouzid, sparking a 4-week uprising that forced Sini El Abidine Ben Ali from power. This year's commemorations come as the country split regarding the move by President Kais Saied back in July to sack the government, freeze parliament and seize far-reaching powers, while vowing to hold his corrupt political rivals to account. On Monday, the president prolonged his suspension of parliament until elections in December 2022 and announced a nationwide public consultation to draw up a new constitution. At least 33 people were reported dead in the Philippines following the passage of powerful Typhoon Ray. More than 300,000 people fled their homes and beachfront resorts as the storm lashed the southern and central regions of the country on Friday, knocking out communications in some areas and tearing roofs off buildings. Nearly 140,000 people were severely affected. Meanwhile, emergency workers are racing to rescue people trapped by severe floods that have submerged large areas of several cities. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization included a traditional Syrian musical genre from the city of Aleppo on its representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. The recognition is seen by Syrians as a new triumph in their battle against terrorism, which has been trying to erase their cultural identity for more than 10 years. Our correspondent Hisham Wanas has the story.
The Syrian Minister of Culture announced the news at a press conference during which she denounced that after more than 10 years of terrorist war, Syria today faces an economic and psychological blockade aimed at destroying its identity and will and undermining its ability to resist. She clarified that with the inclusion of Al-Qudud al-Halabiyya on the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity, the country broke the blockade and managed to place itself on the world cultural map, allowing it to move onto the world tourist map.
The inclusion of Al-Qud on the World Heritage List confirms that no one can tear us away from our roots and alienate us from our culture, as the whole world now recognizes that we are the builders of a civilization and that our culture inherited through generations is recognized worldwide.
Syrians celebrated the news in the capital's iconic Umayvad Square, singing and dancing to the traditional music of Aleppo Al-Qudud. They praised UNESCO's action as an additional step in safeguarding their cultural identity dating back thousands of years, as well as a Syrian victory in the struggle to preserve, protect, and defend national heritage and pass it on to future generations.
This event shows that despite the terrorist war that attack our cultural identity and our heritage, we are able to show the whole world that our intangible heritage is our identity, that we will persevere and pass on the new generations.
I congratulate all the people of Syria for this achievement, which is a victory that shows the culture and civilized nature of the Syrian people. And today, with this achievement, the name of Syria and the flag of Syria will be held high thanks to the civilization and cultural creativity of its people. Al-Qudud al-Halabiyya is a traditional musical genre typical of the Syrian province of Aleppo in the form of a uniform melody sung to the accompaniment of musical ensemble in a religious context. This year, it joins the Damascene Rose and Shadow Play inscribed on the Cultural Heritage List in 2019 and 2018, respectively. Symbols of Syria's rich and diverse culture far removed from the terrorist ideology that, for more than a decade, has been trying in vain to propagate in this Arab country.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss and thank you for watching.